Okay, well, let's call the Wednesday, November the 18th, 2020 meeting of the Civilian Police Review Board to order, and let's do a roll call.
Tony Allegretti.
Present.
Ricardo Diaz. Scott Dossett.
Here.
Katrina Kendall and Daryl Price.
All right, seeing that we do not have a quorum at the meeting, we are going to proceed with essentially things that don't call us to make decisions and take a vote. And so I'd ask for approval of the agenda or any changes to that. Tony?
I have no changes. I would approve.
Okay. We're going to skip number 3 since we can't approve the minutes of the previous meetings without a vote. And we're going to go into public comment now. The first item on public comment is something that I am going to read. This is something that Ricardo has wanted to get into the minutes for a while. Statement on police violence in our community and nation, Urbana-Champaign Friends Meeting, Quakers. So this is from the Quaker Church out on East Main Street in Urbana. We recognize that the role of the police can be challenging. Even when they deal with difficult situations, they are expected to show respect to every community member in every interaction and to treat each individual equally regardless of race or age or gender or economic status. We were distressed by the recent violent arrest of a young Black woman by Urbana police officers and by other episodes of violence by police against community members, disproportionately against people of color, similar to what has been occurring across our nation. These actions cause both physical injury and emotional trauma to the victims, their families, the community, and even the police themselves. We understand that this is not just a problem of individuals, but some of our systems accept and may even encourage this violence and racism, which causes moral injury to those who carry it out, as well as injury to the victims. As friends, Quakers, we believe that every person has that of God within them, some of the divine spirit of goodness and love. We believe that all people should be treated with respect and care. This leads to our commitment to using nonviolent methods to resolve conflicts when they arise, as we do not want to harm others either physically or emotionally. These beliefs also require us to examine our own behavior as individuals and as a group, and to speak out when we see injustice, violence, and oppression in the public realm. We must address systemic racism within ourselves, as well as in our social, religious, and economic institutions, and in our civil society. We stand in solidarity with those who march and protest against the police violence that disproportionately affects Black and brown communities, and against the complacency of the people in our community who don't object. We are called to hold up the value of each of the people who are suffering from this violence and to work to change the systems that perpetuate racism and violence. In keeping with our values, we encourage city and county officials to take the following steps. Increase police training and de-escalation techniques and include follow-up sessions where body cam and dash cam videos are reviewed with officers to discuss what was done well and possible alternatives for each situation that would have better outcomes. Strengthen civilian police review boards in the county and municipalities by ensuring they have access to all complaints and have subpoena power in order to improve performance and also to give community members faith in the system. Develop community forums and other measures to establish effective two-way communication. Increase social services in the community to address issues such as homelessness, substance addiction, mental illness, and domestic violence. In addition to having community-based preventive services, strengthen linkages and collaboration between law enforcement and behavioral health programs. Okay, so that's the statement that I referred to. And Jason, if you're ready, let's see, do we have anybody who has raised their hand to speak?
Yeah, it looks like Tracy Chong has, so I'm going to go ahead and allow Tracy Chong into the meeting.
Please do, thank you. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
Okay,
Yes.
Hi, I'm Tracy Chong from Urbana. I'm going to start by just saying that I was pretty disturbed to hear the way Carol Mitten reported back to City Council regarding your board's decision and discussion regarding the first-hand accounts and complaints based on video. I think what she did by going straight to the police department to get them to say that this was not allowed and then reporting to council that quote unquote, the board made their own interpretations was very disrespectful to your board and not having the interest of Urbana residents as top priority. Your board has already deliberated this issue carefully, and you have made your decision based on the meaning of the ordinance with input from attorneys other than the City Attorney James Simon. So I look forward to your discussion on this issue tonight, and I hope that you guys do not let city staff or UPD representatives push you in directions that don't have civilian oversight as a priority. I also think it would be good for this board to have more involvement in the use of force policy updates. It was quite surprising that the CPRB was not consulted about the use of force listening sessions, as it is an issue directly related to policing and police oversight. During the sessions that just happened, the public's comments were restricted, and the moderator, Lamont Peppers, even actively muted a resident from mentioning Chief Seraphin's name while alluding to the Aaliyah Lewis arrest. There were also no youth participants during the youth listening session, probably due to the harsh warnings before anyone even got to speak. So despite these concerns and failures, Mayor Marlin spoke about the event as if it was a great success while reporting to City Council. So this is a very good example of the kind of dishonest conversation that makes it so hard for the public and makes the public so distrustful of the city, and why your role as CPRB board members is so important. I would suggest that you guys review these listening sessions if you were not in attendance, and in the future, ask city staff or ask why your board is not included for such issues and events. It was also during this meeting where Chief Seraphin finally admitted that there was a violation of policy during the Aaliyah Lewis incident. And this is a very big deal since it shows that internal reviews by the police and even external reviews conducted with a bias towards the police are not only meaningless, but also dangerous. So this makes your board's job, the role of each one of you, so important because you guys are the ones to perform independent civilian reviews. You are the voice, the eyes, the ears. You represent civilians, and I hope as you move forward, you have this as the guiding principle. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. Any other hands up, Jason?
I think Mr. Hanson has got a hand up.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, just fine. Thank you, Christopher.
Hi, my name is Christopher Hanson. I think you guys have heard me speak before. I feel like Tracy Chong probably said most of the things I was planning to say, but I guess I'll just echo some of the issues. And yeah, I agree. Harold Mitten seemed to be kind of tattletaling on you guys for coming up with your own twisted interpretation of the ordinance on firsthand accounts, and that's not what happened. You guys, see the ordinance as it's written, and you made a determination that this is what it allows for it. I don't really see the problem there. And I think I should point out, I don't know if you guys watch other city council or other city meetings, but there was a Human Relations Commission hearing this last week, and the issue was that the city attorney, James Simon, had denied a particular complaint. He said there was no jurisdiction, there was no probable cause, and he was just wrong. That hearing was a travesty, and we kind of saw in regards to the way the city was handling Freedom of Information Act requests. We saw, Assistant City Attorney Kurt Borman and City Attorney James Simon say, this is what we're doing, this is right, this is illegal, we're all doing it right. And then we saw letter after letter after letter after letter from the Illinois Attorney General saying that what the city was doing was illegal. They were improperly denying requests. They were charging illegal fees on public records requests. And so the reason I'm telling you this is that you have, as a board, very, very good cause to seriously question anything that the city legal department, tries to convince you of. And I encourage you to keep an extremely skeptical attitude towards these city staff members who appear to be trying to do everything they possibly can to obstruct any process that would allow for accountability. It's just really, really kind of disgusting and sad that this is their posture. I don't know if I can't remember if I contacted the CPRB directly, but about this issue, but I'm sure you all know about the Alea Lewis incident because it's pretty widely known at this point. I wrote an article about that particular arrest and posted it, and I sent it to the city council, and I pointed out some issues with what I saw as obvious misconduct. And I did this, just the day of the Hillard Heinz review presentation. And as you might recall, the Urbana police issued press releases, the mayor made statements, Seraphin made statements. They gave 3 different presentations at city council meetings, did their own internal use of force review. Seraphin double checked all this work, and then they hired Hillard Heinz to do their own review. Everyone said that everything the police had done was done just right. It took me about 5 minutes to find an issue of obvious misconduct where the city chief Seraphin has now had to essentially backtrack and admit that there was misconduct in that arrest. And the particular issue I pointed out is that Officer Eric Ruff had the safety selector switch on his rifle in the fire position the entire time he was wrestling with Alea Lewis and pointing it at her, the other officers, and himself. A ridiculously, absurdly negligent move by this police officer. And the question is, how is it that Chief Seraphin, Deputy Chief, his top lieutenants didn't catch this? And I think the answer is they didn't want to. Or they thought they could just sneak it by us. And then the question is, how did Hillard Heinz, our $20,000 review, not catch this? And the answer is they didn't want to. They wanted to sneak it by you. And this just proves how terrible the police are at reviewing themselves. And it doesn't just bring into question that particular review, it brings into question all of their use of force reviews and all of their misconduct reviews, and it just shows that they can't do it right, or that they probably can but don't want to. So anyways, I'm just encouraging you as much as possible to keep a skeptical eye on everything you look at. Thanks.
Right, great. Thank you, Christopher. Anyone else want to raise their hand before we continue on with the agenda? I'm looking at people who are in as attendees. All right, counting down 3, 2, 1. Let's go on to agenda number 5, unfinished business, and follow up from the January request for TASER review. This is something that Rich Searles is going to take us through. A little bit of background. I don't know which month it was, but during a regular TASER discharge review session, we asked for a piece of video that it just took a little time for us to get. And I think most people on the board have had a chance now to view it. And Rich, you're going to kind of walk us through that, I suppose, right?
Yeah, it seems most prudent to probably just go through and read what I read before in terms of setting up the video. So, Mr. Dossett, you're correct. This is a TASER discharge. The video that was previously seen came from the TASER camera, and I believe it was you, Mr. Dossett, that asked for the squad car camera. So some of the delay was my fault, some of the delay was COVID's fault, some of the delay was just scheduling. So I'm sorry it took so long, but we're here and I've got the squad car video. Mr. Liggett, could you go ahead and cue that video while I'm reading this? On February 6, 2019 at approximately 11:19 hours, 23:19 hours, which is 11:19 p.m. UPD officers were dispatched to report of a physical domestic at a convenience store. Officers were provided with a specific description of the man and woman involved. The officers arrived and located both subjects nearby. Officers stopped. Jason, can you pause that just real quick? Thanks, I appreciate it. Let's see, where were we? The officers arrived and located the people involved nearby. Officers stopped the couple and began discussing the incident. Officers soon learned that the female was wanted on a warrant. The female was arrested. As the arrest was taking place, the male announced that if the female was going to jail, he was too. The male then shoved a police officer. Officers grappled with the male to effect an arrest. During the arrest, a taser officer discharged his taser against the male in his midsection, but due to a limited spread of the probes, no reaction was observed. The officers then completed a drive stun follow-up to enact neuromuscular incapacitation. After the arrest, the male was arrested for threatening officers and their families with physical harm and even rape. The male arrestee was taken to the county jail and charged with aggravated battery to a peace officer and intimidation. Okay, Jason, if you could go ahead and press play, I'd appreciate it.
Baby, where you going? Yeah, I'm going. Come on. She ain't got no damn warrant. Come on. I'm going to jail too. Right on, motherfucker. Taser. All right. Hey, but come over there. Turn over there. Put your hands on your back. You guys got it? I'm so live. Damn, baby. Oh, that's my motherfucking music. Watch your hand. She's going to jail. I'm going to jail. I just keep up. First one with that damn baby. I just keep up. You got that. Why you like that ass, AK ass bitches? What y'all go to hell with my motherfucking
Well, you got what you wanted.
I know. I always do what I want, bitch.
Okay.
So pussy ass. Bitch me like shit.
Okay.
Okay, Jason.
Sorry, could you play that one more time? I didn't, just the beginning before the deploy the taser.
Baby, where you going? Yeah, I'm going. Come on. She ain't got no damn warrant. Come on. I'm going to jail too. Right on, motherfucker. Taser. All right.
Okay, that's all I needed to see.
Come over there.
Okay, so during the normal process of this, of course, we have, kind of boned up on these cases. For those of you listening who may not know, lots of paperwork gets filled out every time the taser is displayed or discharged. If we read through officer reports from the event. So we're kind of disconnected from that now. We did want to make this available to the public. We're in a situation where we're really not in a taser review session. So I don't see that we can really move forward with any kind of action on this should it be necessary. And I don't think it probably is. This doesn't really substantially change, my rendering of the original case. So Anthony, do you have any comments about it?
So I wasn't on the board in January when this was up for review. I'm not aware. So I'm assuming that no weapons were found on the individual.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. And there were how many officers there?
Offhand, I don't know.
I mean, in the video, it looked like there were 4.
Yeah, there were several. There's 3 or 4 at least.
Okay. It didn't sound to me like there was any request for him to put his hands behind his back or stop or back away. Is that right?
No, my understanding of the situation is he was sort of trying to walk through the officer to get to his girlfriend.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't, I didn't hear anyone say stop or stay where you are or you're being detained. Was that the case?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And he didn't have a warrant for his arrest. Is that right?
No, it was just the female.
Okay. And he wasn't.
What I know. I'm sorry. What I know of this case, I've read quite some time ago, and I watched this video again today to refresh my recollection. So
okay.
Beyond what is shown in the video, I don't have a ton of information on immediately available to me.
Okay. I mean, was he a suspect was he being detained for any sort of criminal activity, or was just the stop was based on what? It
was based on a call of a domestic dispute between the two.
Okay. But they hadn't determined who was the aggressor in the domestic dispute at that time?
I don't believe so.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have anything else. I mean, if this isn't up for review, I would need to be more familiar with the other surrounding reports.
And I can tell you that if you want to go in and read the reports, those are available in the portal.
Yeah, I'd have to look at them.
Yeah. So-
Yeah, and I did look at them before we viewed this, and so there's a lot of there's a lot there that you can glean from the reports. Certainly from the officers. I do understand your sensitivity about the fact that there wasn't any kind of clear direction issued right before the deployment of the taser. But based on what I read today, I really can't second guess the officers that were there. So.
It seems like they were fairly quick to deploy the taser, especially in a domestic incident. Usually the standard procedure is they separate the two quarreling parties and get each other's stories. I mean, him announcing he's going to go to jail too, I don't know if you can determine what that means just from him saying that, but it seems like they were quick to deploy the taser, especially with 4 officers present against one individual. It doesn't sound like there was a report of a weapon involved. But again, if we're not reviewing this, we're just discussing, what.
Sure. The other part of that is just because there were 4 officers there doesn't mean that they were all standing around looking at this gentleman, right? So some of the other officers.
Well, they were all right there.
They were close enough to be able to respond in a relatively timely fashion. So
Sure.
they might have left the female off to the side with one officer and then came over to help the 2 officers that were standing there. But yes, there were at least 3 or 4 people right there pretty close.
Yes.
Okay, well, I tell you what, let's do this. Down in new business, we've got a schedule for a new taser discharge review. Are we sitting on any cases that we need to look at, Rich? And do you know how many?
Yeah, so I went through the file today. There's a total of 6 discharges that we need to review. 1 is eligible for review. The other 5 are still pending court. I checked all the dockets this afternoon.
Okay, so we only have 1 case.
Yeah.
Would it be educational or wise, especially since we've got some new members of the board, and this would give us an opportunity to review another discharge, to look at this one again, or what do you think about it?
Yeah, we can totally do that. If you want, I can go into the display file and we could go over a couple displays if you want to get some groundwork in there too.
Okay, well, I just think it's good to do reps,
Sure.
So Tony, does that put you a little bit more at ease about what you saw in this short presentation? If we go ahead and add that back in to the scheduled review of one other discharge that we have coming up?
Sorry, you want to put
I've just suggested to Rich that we put the 2-6 discharge that we just saw partial video of.
Yeah.
You had some concern about in with one other discharge case we have to still schedule, and we'll look at it again.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. So let's move on then.
Mr. Dossett, can I ask you a
sorry.
quick clarifying question? Do you just want do those 2 discharges, or did you want me to bring other things to the table?
I think anything you've got that you want to talk about in terms of tasers, we should do all at the same time.
Well, we've got some displays that, if you want, I can dig into the files and I can bring up some displays. I would need some time to do the redactions on the video because I don't automatically redact those now.
Well, my understanding is that this board has elected not to review displays.
That's correct,
Okay.
but for purposes of, as you said, providing some instruction to new members, it might be, it's at least a thought to consider reviewing a couple displays.
Hey,
just to give it flavor.
yes, if you're willing to do the redactions, please.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll go through, and if you want, I can send you an email and you can take a look at some of the cases and we can collectively decide on a couple cases. I don't want someone to think that I'm cherry picking cases.
Yeah,
So,
sure. No, that's a generous offer. Thank you, Rich.
okay, thank you, Mr. Dawson.
All right. Okay, so we're done with A, Tony? You all right to go ahead?
Yeah, I guess one request, the ones that are pending, do you know what case, the case files are? Are they all 2020 cases or are they previous?
Some are 19, some are 20. I don't have the docket numbers with me.
Do you know if they were misdemeanors or felonies?
I think it was a blend. I know one is, I take that back. I believe
The reason
two
why I
are-
ask is because I don't think I have any conflicts, but they may be potential previous clients of mine, and I would like to know if they were before
I tell you what, I will send you an email and
that's fine.
I can give you the docket numbers and you can take a look. I know there's
Yeah, that's all I need.
there's a couple cases on there that are coming back for status hearings on mental health stuff. So
If you could just send me the case numbers, I could look it up, and that should jog my memory.
sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, so on to B. As many of you may recall, there was a lot of work done on a petition about reforming CPRB done by a group of 8 or 10 citizens. And we've been kind of kicking it around amongst ourselves in the board without actually very much progress in terms of exactly how to handle this. And we've got a decision to basically place these into several categories. And Carol Mitten, I think, is going to join us to talk a little bit about how the categories are formed. Carol, do you want to just start with this?
Sure. So, you know, the board was kind of struggling with how to manage a conversation around the items in the petition. So the attachment that was included with the agenda broke them into 3 categories. I mean, they could be in different categories. I mean, they were in 5 categories in the petition, but in terms of sort of managing how you move forward with the different items, I suggested that they could be put in these categories: practices that can or could be changed without ordinance changes, and then practices that can or could be changed with ordinance changes, but without changing the oversight model. So it would continue to be an appeals review type model, and then practices that can or could be changed by changing the oversight model and or the collective bargaining agreement with the FOP. So the attachment breaks the items down into those different categories, just as a way of chunking them out so that they can be discussed in kind of a manageable, sections. So what I did for this session, if you'd like me to go ahead and walk through it, is the things that can or could be changed without ordinance changes are things that are more or less in the power of the city to do. And so what I did was I just made a quick little PowerPoint that walks through each of those items, and then we have a response and gives a status of, to the extent that changes are being made, gives a status. Do you want me to walk through that now?
I have no objections. Tony, how about you?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen here. So let me do slide. Okay, so the titles at the top are just the categories that were in the petition, and then each of the items I noted which number and letter it was. So if anybody wants to kind of crosswalk it, that's what this shows. So it's the first issue is all complaints filed should go directly to the CPRB. Gatekeeping by Urbana PD and city staff should be minimized. Complaints should only be able to be rejected by the CPRB itself, not staff, as this undercuts any semblance of independence. So, oops, no, that's not good. There we go. So all complaints right now are assigned a number and placed in the portal once they're received. If the complaints were delivered directly to CPRB members, then we wouldn't be able to protect the anonymity of the officers. So given that, city staff supports CPRB, city staff does have that level of involvement. What we decided, even though we haven't had any complaints that have come in since in this category, if there were any complaints that we thought were not qualified to be complaints, then we were going to bring those to the CPRB and let the CPRB decide up front before they were investigated. We haven't had any of those yet. So if there were any rejected complaints going forward, they would be rejected by the CPRB. Next issue is CPRB members must be trained and knowledgeable both in the scope of their own duties, and then it says the CPRB ordinance is less than 10 pages, and also Urbana PD policy. As in Champaign, CPRB members are responsible for understanding the full policies. Upon joining the board, Urbana PD staff should provide board members with an unredacted copy of all policy and training documents, which should also be available at CPRB meetings for reference and be given a detailed training seminar. So, as you know, we've had ongoing efforts to train CPRB members in the scope of their duties, and frankly, we're behind in getting through the full range of items that we had put forward to council, just because of time constraints and the time constraints both on staff and the CPRB. So we're going to continue to work on that. So we totally agree that CPRB members need to be trained. It takes time to do that. The redacted policies are made available to the public and are likewise available to the CPRB members. So we're not prepared to make fully unredacted policies available to CPRB members. For anybody that's been following along in that larger conversation about the redactions in our policies, I think there's been about, there were something like 17 policies that included redactions, and 7 of those that included redactions have now been completely opened up. There are no redactions, and those have been updated on the website wherever the policies are. Then there's 10 policies that remain that have redactions in them. And I know that I think it was earlier this week that UPD staff and legal sat down to go through the last set of redactions to see how much more we could open up. And I was told today that it was about 80% of what's currently remaining as redacted will be opened up, and it'll be very narrow redactions that remain, and there will be explanations in terms of why each of those redactions remains. So just to know that we're making the policies more open than they have been in the past, but there will continue to be some very limited redactions. So the grayed out part is actually in another category, but I'll just read it for completeness. The CPRB must be granted full access to Urbana Police Department records without anonymity for officers involved, and this will require renegotiating the collective bargaining agreement. In the interim, all officers should be assigned unique anonymous identifying numbers for the CPRB records so that CPRB can track repeat offenders. So that is something that we are actively doing. We haven't completed that yet, but that's absolutely our intent. All past complaints, since at least the establishment of the ordinance, should be entered into the CPRB database to track for patterns of complaints. These should include and track race/ethnicity, age, gender, and location of the person having the police interaction and the officers involved. So we have logs that go back to 2004, and the items that are tracked on those logs are enumerated here. So it's the date received, the name of the complainant, the officers who were involved, the date assigned, to whom the investigation was assigned, the due date for the investigation, the date the investigation was completed, the date given to the chief's due date, and then the final disposition, whatever that disposition was. So we no longer have the original complaint forms prior to 2012. However, the complaint forms prior to the current times only tracked age and the location of the interaction. And the new form includes more demographic information, but that section is optional now. So this is something that perhaps you want to talk about further. I don't know if you want me to pause now or go through everything first, but our ability to track all of this information has, first of all, we can't go all the way back. We can only go back to 2012. We don't have all the information even from 2012, and we will not have all the information going forward because people may opt not to share it with us. So if that's something,
Carol, the original complaints you said are gone before 2012. Is there a copy or a digital copy?
no, they've been disposed of according to records retention rules.
Well, right. You don't have to keep them past 7 years, but it doesn't mean you have to destroy them.
No, I understand, but they're gone. I've been informed.
There was no scan made of them or anything of that nature.
I was told that they've been disposed of, and when we get rid of paper records, we can also simultaneously get rid of the digital records as well. I don't think that there was any concern at the time that we were getting rid of something that we would need going forward. So I think in the future we might want to retain the records longer than we have in the past.
Was that brought up to the CPRB at the time to destroy the records, or?
I don't know. I haven't been involved. I haven't even been with the city all that time, so I don't know.
Okay. And when was the new form instituted? Was that in
2020, we worked on the form.
Oh, okay.
You can see in a few more slides that there were concerns about a few things on the form, and we worked with the CPRB members at the time to make it more plain language. I think it's it's at an 8th grade reading level now, and it's just easier to use.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we can talk about this further in the future if you want to change anything on the form in terms of things that are optional to track or not. And like I said, we could go back and we could look at least a couple items of information as far back as 2012. But I think as was discussed at one point, that prior to this year, 2020, we only get like roughly 10 complaints a year. So looking for trends in those complaints would be a little bit difficult also.
Yeah, it's a small sample.
So anyway, okay, let me move on from here.
Well, let me just interject here real
Okay,
quick.
sorry.
And this goes actually down to E just a bit. I mean, I think the criticism I have is that this item talks about past complaints, not the past complaint forms. And so it is my intention during this work session that we're talking about to try to fill out the 2019 report, to actually have the full suite of available information, which would include UPD investigative things, the original incident reports, and that kind of stuff, from which I think easily can be derived a pretty robust set of geographic and demographic kind of indicators. Now we'll see how much I want to take on and carry to do that review, but it's my intent to reproduce some of those maybe familiar spreadsheets that give a lot of this information that's being talked about from each of those calendar years. So.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what we can pull together based on that review. Okay. The next issue is each month, Urbana PD should present a summary of police actions to the CPRB, and then an example was given as X number of arrests, X number of use of force incidents or types. And so UPD doesn't track these metrics on a monthly basis. Typically, these statistics are included in the annual report. To track these figures on a more frequent basis would require staff time that is not currently available. So this is a bandwidth issue. It's not that we're opposed to it, it's just that we don't have the bandwidth for this kind of tracking. The notary requirement for submitting complaints must be eliminated, and then it goes on. And so I'll just skip to the end. That was one of the things we changed on the form, Tony. The notary requirement has been eliminated. The full Urbana PD policy. I'm sorry, Scott, did you want?
I was, in regards to the notary issue, or if there's a concern about whether someone's submitting a false report, I mean, we can include, a certification from the Illinois, the compiled statutes that you're submitting this knowing that there's a penalty of perjury or a felony charge if there's a concern, if that was a concern or the reason for the notary requirement. But removing the notary, I think, is the way to go. But if there's some concern that people are submitting false complaints, which I haven't heard of that being the case, and I don't think there's any evidence of that from a prior case, that could always be something that would be included.
Well, that's why the attestation section, I think, was added to the complaint form, Tony. We agreed that the notary represented a heavy burden, but under advice from people like you and perhaps City Legal, we added that attestation section, and so I think we're already doing that, aren't we?
So there was a statement, but when we removed the notary requirement, we rewrote the attestation. So it has language of the type that you're referring to.
Oh, okay. Then that's.
I would encourage you just to take a look at that on the form, just so you know kind of how we balance that out.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, removing the notary also makes sense because then it's just not something that it's just an administrative hurdle that we can remove and still keep people from submitting false complaints, or at least having they'd be aware that there's a penalty for doing that.
Right. The full Urbana PD policy should be publicly available, unredacted besides personal information, so that residents can understand their rights, what to expect when interacting with police, and can make informed complaints that allege specific actionable violations. So I spoke to this earlier. So the policies that include redactions are being reviewed to minimize the information being withheld, but we will continue to have some limited redactions. And inasmuch as there's no requirement for a complainant to cite specific policies in making a complaint, the limited redaction should not be a barrier to the complaint process. I mean, it's rare that someone is going to cite chapter and verse, or that they do cite chapter and verse when they make a complaint. They just generally, they just write their reaction and what they perceived as wrong. All right. The complaint form must be written in easy to understand, clear language. The form should make clear the complaint process for residents so that they know their rights. It should be available in English, Spanish, French, Chinese, and other languages common in Urbana. So as we were just talking about, the complaint form's been rewritten, and we're working on the translations. The translations themselves are relatively straightforward, but if you go on the website for the CPRB, it is not. It's messy. Anybody that wanted to find the form, if it was in a foreign language, all we would do right now, given the way the website is structured, is we would just post it. It wouldn't be easy for them to find. So we're actually working on a redesign for the website so that everything is more accessible to people, and then we'll post the translated complaint forms. Complaint forms must be available to be downloaded and submitted online. At the time of submission, they should be automatically assigned tracking numbers and made available online to CPRB members. Physical complaints should be assigned a number given to the complainant and entered into the system upon receipt. So the complaint form can currently be downloaded and submitted online. Right now, we don't have the technology to automatically assign tracking numbers. That has to be done by a staff member, but it's done shortly after we receive it and entered into the system. So it'd be nice if it was all automatic, but we're just not there yet. Small city. All right. Printouts of the complaint form must be available at the Urbana Free Library, Cunningham Township, Land of Lincoln Legal, Courage Connection, Races, Pace, and other locations. Staff can send the complaint forms to these organizations, but we don't have any way to compel them to make them available in their offices. So that's something that we can do by way of follow-up. Physical sealed copies of complaint forms should be accepted at other major city buildings such as the Urbana Free Library and Cunningham Township for internal delivery to the South Vine Street building. I think it was at the encouragement of the CPRB that staff created a single point of entry to the complaint process through the Human Relations Office. Since we don't control these other organizations, allowing them to basically become an access point to the complaint process, I think it actually works against the single point of entry and might be confusing, and certainly would lessen accountability, because if somebody said, well, I turned this in at the library, and we said, well, we don't have it, then that creates an opportunity for slippage. So this is one that we actually don't endorse. I don't know how you all feel about it, but if you had any comments right now.
Agreed. I don't endorse it either.
I mean, it seems like if the root of the problem would be, or allowing it to be submitted online and having it be automatically assigned a number, and that way, as long as you have internet access, you have the copies of the complaint are available to anyone who has access to a computer, and that would kind of remove some of the concerns. I mean, obviously that there's still a digital divide issue.
Sure.
But are there any other city locations besides the city hall that they could be made available at?
Well, we have fire stations, we have public works, we have the LRC. Those would not be, I mean, the fire stations might be a place where people might want to make such a submission, but I don't think anyone would go to public works necessarily, or certainly not the LRC expecting to make a complaint. But I think this particular recommendation, I think, is focused on people with a hard copy, right? As opposed to a digital copy, that they want to take the hard copy and submit it through interoffice mail. If they did bring it to a city location, it could be addressed in interoffice mail to the HRO, but it's not quite the same as delivering it directly. But when you take that yet another step removed and you say, okay, we're going to ask the library to do that, which to my knowledge, we don't have interoffice mail with the library. And I didn't know that we had that with the township either. But it's one more step removed in an organization that we don't control as the city. So. Right.
That's why I was asking about other city locations. I mean, the fire departments might be a spot where we would want to allow someone to submit one, to get sent to interoffice mail, and that way it's still within the city. Yeah, I think trying to get other entities that are not part of the city is going to be difficult to control that. But giving people more places to submit, especially if they're not comfortable submitting it at City Hall, to where the police station is located. I think that offering an alternative is a good idea for those who they're submitting a complaint that they believe there's been misconduct by the police, and we're asking them to go to the police station or the city hall where the police station is located and submit a complaint. Some people may have a problem doing that.
Yeah, the most natural place that I would like to see us direct people is to the city clerk's office. Partly because if you're physically carrying something in, I mean, you can't get into the second floor without pressing the buzzer and being allowed to be in. And so, in addition, I think that people are used to kind of thinking of the city clerk as a little bit more of a neutral arbiter of things. And so that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think we probably want to think about how we want to write that on the form without making it too cluttered, because one of the things that I learned, I wasn't the one who was writing the form to simplify it, but the more words you put on the form, works against the comprehension level. So if we, to try to explain all of this on the form might just, be confusing. So we can take another look at that. But if somebody did walk it into the clerk's office, it would get submitted to the HRO.
Yeah, I don't know if telling people that they can submit it at a different location is going to cause that much confusion.
Well, if there are locations that are not, I mean, what we could say is any city building.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that without enumerating them. That might be an option. And then just make people at those buildings aware, if you receive one of these, you need to put it in interoffice mail. So I think I might have skipped something. Let me see. No, there we go. Okay. All complaints must be assigned tracking numbers on receipt and publicly recorded with limited identifying information such as date received and date considered by CPRB. Rejection of complaints for any reason must be listed on the public record. So this sounds like a real-time log that could be publicly available, and we're not opposed to this suggestion, but it's just more demands on staff time right now that we don't have available, but this is definitely something that we can work towards. We're not opposed to this. Okay,
You're talking about like an IT, some sort of a computerized assignment.
Yeah, I mean, to have you just have to understand we're a small city with a modest budget. So ideally, there would be the big log, right? And so we enter things in once, and then certain information is loaded in real time to a log that is available for the public to see. I don't know that we have that technological capacity right now. So it would be something that staff would have to enter information into the more complete log and then remove certain information into this other log and then periodically post that. I don't know that that could be done automatically. Mm-hmm. But so that, it's additional staff time, and staff time is stretched right now. But it's a perfectly fine idea that we can get to, but it's going to be a little while before we can get to that. And it might be something that we can do monthly, perhaps, rather than having it be more real time. Okay. The CPRB or HRO must maintain an internal database that tracks all complaints, rejected or not, including data on, and then I'm not going to read all of this, but you can see the type of information that's being suggested that that's tracked. And so some of these items are going to create additional work for staff. Not a lot, but it all takes time. So for instance, figuring out the ward rather than the address is additional work that I'm not sure if you were going to do a heat map. I don't know that you would do it by ward. You might just do it by address. So, I think if we thought ahead to how we would want to use the information, we might decide that maybe we would want to tweak some of these. And then if you did do a heat map, what would that show? It might make someone feel vulnerable if a heat map sort of targeted down to their house. I don't know. Maybe that's the reason for tracking the ward. And then there's disclosures that individuals may or may not be comfortable making about race or ethnicity, gender, and so forth. So we're open to talking to you more about the kinds of information you'd like us to track. As I said, we put some optional disclosures on the new form. There may be other things. So, this is something that we should probably have a separate conversation on at some point. And then every quarter, the CPRB must publicly release statistics listing the cumulative and quarterly numbers of complaints received, and then similar sorts of, information, only it would be aggregated as opposed to, delineated. And same response, we're open to having a conversation with you about the kinds of information that you think would be helpful to collect and track over time.
That's another reason, Carol, that I want to do this kind of working session on the 25th, because then we'll actually have our hands in the data,
Uh-huh.
looking at it and seeing what can be gleaned out of there, keeping the anonymity of the people who filed the complaint in question to move forward with some of these summary type things.
Uh-huh. And then I think this is the final one. The city council, mayor, and CPRB must engage in public outreach and notify the public about the CPRB and the complaint process. All CPRB policies, the rules of complaint hearings, should be publicly available and linked from the CPRB page on the website. So we're happy to assist you in any outreach efforts that you would like to undertake. And we, as I mentioned, we're updating the website, and we will make all of the relevant ordinances, policies, procedure manuals, and anything else that you would like us to post on there. We'll put that on the website if it's not already there, but we'll put it in a more, user-friendly and accessible format.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carol.
That constitutes the first category and the response from staff.
Right, great. I think in the interest of time, we need to keep on moving, especially since I want us to be able to give the community plenty of time with this next item here, and to give you plenty of time, Carol, since we've talked about it a little bit already. C is the legal guidance regarding interpretation of first-hand account language. I'm assuming, Carol, you're the one that's going to talk to us about that?
Yes, I will. I can. So if you'll recall, you all had a conversation about this at your last meeting, and so there were two things. One is based on the feedback that council sent back to you, that I was the messenger. I got the distinct impression that there was an expectation from council that there would be responses to the questions that they raised. And then Ricardo had also said, if the council doesn't like this, they'll let us know. So I wanted to report to council, but I also on your decisions. But then I also, in discussing it internally, had concerns, because in addition to just the concerns that had been kind of volleyed back and forth among the different attorneys, of which I am not one, about what constitutes a firsthand account, there's also concern that that accepting a video witness kind of a complaint would violate the collective bargaining agreement. So we asked our outside counsel, who's assisting with the some of our collective bargaining, to address the issue, and that was the memo that I shared with you and with council that addressed his two concerns. One is that, in his opinion, personal firsthand account, a video wouldn't constitute a firsthand account, and he included an attachment about the limitations on body cameras. But the equally, if not more important, is that anything other than a firsthand account violates our collective bargaining agreement. So that is more, that's an undebatable part, a non-debatable issue. You can debate the other among attorneys, but so the conclusion is that you may not accept video witness complaints, and so that's what I shared that with all the CPRB members and all the council members in a joint email, and I'm happy to participate as best I can in any conversation that you want to have, but that seems to be the end of it as far as from staff's perspective. But happy to hear feedback from you all.
I don't think the collective bargaining argument really ends the question or the debate, because it's still based on the same question of whether or not someone viewing a video is someone with personal knowledge. It's the same argument. It's being rebundled under it's the collective bargaining agreement prevents this, but it's the same question: is someone who watches a video, do they have a firsthand account of personal knowledge? And I think we debated this on this board and found that that's the case. And there have been multiple legal opinions that would argue the contrary. What outside counsel here, Mr. Gert, says, and again, I mean, it's just another opinion. So I don't think the section 1 that he discusses in this case he cites, again, that's an evidentiary question about whether or not, and that was on someone narrating a security cam video. I don't think that gets to the nature of the question that we're asking about. And 2, the collective bargaining agreement that prevents a complaint by someone who doesn't have personal knowledge. What this board had decided or approved of was that someone watching a video has personal knowledge. So, what's the next step here if the board? I mean, the board, I think, was of the opinion that watching a video would allow someone to have personal knowledge. Where if someone files a complaint based on the video, and the police refuse to investigate it, then where do we go from there?
Well, and I think that's kind of where we are, which is that we have been advised by our legal counsel, internal, external, that for us to pursue investigating a complaint that is based on a video witness or is, however we want to characterize that, would violate the collective bargaining agreement. And we do not intend to violate the collective bargaining agreement. So I think some people would find this sort of the crossroads that they would like to rewrite the ordinance so that you would be able to say, well, that's fine, we'll investigate it on our own. But given the model we have, you don't have that authority. So I think that's the impasse that we're at with this particular topic.
Yeah, the only thing I can add, I did a 4-hour NACOL-sponsored seminar on accountability and transparency in law enforcement last week. And there was a little section about video forensic analysis that kind of got a little into the weeds in terms of technical stuff. Frame rates on surveillance videos, frame rates on squad cars, and stuff like that. And the gentleman whose name I can find here, but I'm not gonna take time to look for it. Basically, his kind of closing statement was that everyone wants to say video speaks for itself, but it doesn't. So that was his quote. I know that doesn't do anything for our current situation. That appears to really be how the FOP agreement binds us to what I guess you might say is inactivity, but I'll just throw that out.
So the one thing I want to share, Tony, because I think I can appreciate where you're coming from. You're like, look, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you don't have to, in your role, you are not a steward of the relationship with the FOP, writ large, right? We are. And so we have to concern ourselves with being respectful of a collective bargaining agreement that we entered into as the city. And that's a relationship that we are the stewards of. We have a relationship with the FOP, and we want that to be a positive relationship. So you might want to push that envelope. We don't want to. We want to respect it. But what I would say is that it is important, however, that the police have confidence in the CPRB as much as the public. It's supposed to be something that everybody believes is.
Right, and I think again the issue is about getting the complaint in the door. If it doesn't turn out to be an issue, and I don't think anyone is saying the video is going to be the only evidence here, which is I think where you get, Scott, where you're getting at, talking about the different frame rates and attacking the credibility or what the video actually shows. But what we're talking about is the incident. How was it? If it was captured on video, were there other people around? What we want to hear from what the police had to say about how the incident was handled. It seems like and I understand the city wants to have a working relationship with the FOP, but the city and the FOP are on opposing sides of that agreement. They're separate parties. They're not. They should work together, but if the complaint, if there's a disagreement about the interpretation of what that language means, is there an arbitrary, and I don't know if I'm outstepping where we're at here with the CPRB, but it seems like the city should be trying to enforce their ordinances just as strongly as they are supposed to be upholding their agreements under a collective bargaining agreement. And it sounds like there's a discrepancy as to what personal knowledge means. I think that's pretty clear, but it sounds like there needs to be some sort of resolution as to what this means. From what you're telling us, even if they pass an ordinance that allowed for video by or a viewing of the video would consist of personal knowledge, there would be a question of whether or not that fits within the collective bargaining agreement. So where do we go from there?
So to that point, I think this is maybe where things went a little. And I'm just looking at the clock.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
We may defer this to another meeting.
But
sure, and we're probably going to have to. It's 8 minutes, I think.
Can I just finish my thought though?
Please. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I think the one step that got the stitch that got dropped was when there was this dynamic that the CPRB said to the council, we would like you to amend this language. Council sent back some questions and you're like, well, we're just going to make that interpretation on our own. If the council had gone through the process of noticing that we're considering making this language change, then the FOP could have said, we disagree, we think that's a violation, and we could have had that very specific conversation, and then a decision could be made, right? But that's not how it happened, and I think that the lack of that piece is problematic. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay. And Tony, if it's all right with you, we need to do a couple of things.
I understand.
A little bit of a warning to people out there who may be ready to give public comment. That section may be canceled. We literally have another meeting in this building in this room that starts in 7 minutes. Status of complaints and appeals. I can, I guess, do a little bit of an update with that, very quickly. We have 64 total appeals for 2020 and 92 total complaints for 2020. We've been trying to schedule a hearing on a select group of those 64 appeals for a couple of months now, and we're still working on that. So any additional comment, Carol or Tony?
No.
Okay. E here, the status of the 2019 annual report. Give me just a minute here to say that I very much want to try to speak to the spirit of some of the recommendations that are listed in this batch that we're calling could be implemented without ordinance changes vis-a-vis the community petition, by doing some work with staff and I believe with the representative of the UPD to try to back out available information from 2012 to the present to augment the 2019 report that we have. Under 6, new business, can we schedule a taser discharge review session, or is this something that we can do by email?
We can do that by email.
Okay, that's all right. We'll proceed with some announcements. Upcoming meetings, November the 30th, an appeals hearing, December the 3rd. The second Hopper potential ordinance changes arising from the petition. And then we have a regular meeting on December the 17th. Also an announcement, so we still have 2 vacancies for the CPRB. And the Human Rights and Equity Officer recruitment is still ongoing. Do I hear anything else from Tony or Carol? Maybe we could sneak in a couple of people for public comment until we run out of time. Jason, are you there and ready? Jason?
Yeah, yes, I'm ready. And we have Christopher Hansen has his hand raised.
Okay, so can we go to 2 minutes?
Sure, we can do that.
All righty, thank you so much. Christopher, please begin.
You hear me?
Yeah, you're here.
Yes.
I'll speak as quickly as I can. You had mentioned that this board elected not to review taser displays. I find it curious that Carol Mitten didn't interject into that issue. You do not have the option to not review taser displays. It's written into your ordinance. You have to do it. If you want to change that, you're going to need to go to city council. I don't know why Mitten isn't giving you instructions on that issue, but she's being very obstructionist on other issues. And it seems to me you're going to have to get every single thing that the CPRB wants to do written into the ordinance so that a 5-year-old can understand it, because anything that isn't written that way is going to be misinterpreted by city staff, and they're just going to keep messing around. I'm confused about this issue of anonymity of officers. If I send a FOIA request for police complaints, I'm getting those officers' names. You can't withhold that. The city can't withhold that. So I'm confused why we're playing this silly game of not letting the CPRB members see the officers' names and complaints. It makes no sense. It's ridiculous. If I have an appeals hearing with the board, I'm going to be telling you the officers' names, and you won't be able to help but to hear me utter those names. The police policies were not opened up. They were changed. So Mitten mentioned redactions being removed. In fact, it seems most of those policies are actually changed to new 2020 policies from Lexipol, the company that they buy policies from. So my question is, when you guys are reviewing police complaints from before October of this year, you can't use the new policies to weigh those complaints. You're going to have to use the old policies. So I'm still wondering why you still need access to those old policies and on redacted. And since they're no longer policies, of course they can be released on redacted at this point. In general, hiding policies is just insane. There's nothing that the city of Urbana or the police department needs to hide from the public or the CPRB. I'm also wondering about kind of a due process issue, you might call it. How is the CPRB or anyone going to determine if a complaint is or isn't fully or partially based on video? Are you going to, what if the complaint doesn't mention if it's based on video or not? What are you going to do? Just deny everything based on the notion that it might be based on video? And last, I'll point out, the CPRB is there for the public. It's really not there for the police department. That's why it's a civilian board. And as far as the ordinance goes, I guess in the exchange between Carol Mitten and Allegretti, the CPRB is obliged to process complaints as written in their ordinance. They don't have the option to deny it. So they've made their best interpretation of what they need to do, and that's what they're going to do. I suppose the city could sue them for listening to a complaint that the city thinks is not allowed. That would be interesting. But I don't think you can take an administrative stance that we're not doing this because the ordinance says you have to do it. So do it. Thanks.
All righty. Tracy, can you get in just a couple of seconds because we really need to get out of here. I apologize for running over.
Hi, can you hear me? I'll try to be quick.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, first up, thanks to Mr. Allegretti for bringing all the issues about the taser follow-up, the issues that you raised. Your points were exactly what was running through my mind, and I think any member of the public watching this would have the same questions and concerns. So my concerns were, well, that's walking through an officer to see really just get you tased. There was no warning. That's against policy. Was there any reason to think why the guy was armed? Were both his arms visible? The the taser was deployed really quickly. And this was a drive stun usage, which is against policy in the first place, with very specific exemptions. Did this case meet the criteria for exemptions? None of these questions were asked before. Mr. Allegretti also brought up the number of officers that piled upon the man. And then here we have another example of Deputy Chief Sills doing his thing, trying to talk about the number of officers in a different context. Even though Mr. Allegretti is new and wasn't there for the initial review, there was nothing in the initial review that explained all these questions. This is why I was concerned watching it and have kept pushing for more video. And this video is exactly why pushing for more video is so important. And I think I can see why it was not shown during the initial review and kind of swept under the rug. So I think you guys need to follow up on this because there is a problem. Regarding the first-hand account, Mr. Allegretti is spot on. The question really is, if witnessing the incident via video is counted as a first-hand account, all the talk about collective bargaining and Mitten saying that the city has no intention of breaking the FOP, it's just smoke and mirrors. That's not the question. And contrary to what Carol Mitten said, this cannot be the end of it. And you guys really need to continue following up with this. We'll be following with you. Yeah, thank you.
All right. We don't have a quorum. Public comment is over. I guess I'd thank everyone for attending this meeting of the Civilian Police Review Board. And we are ready to switch to your next meeting. Jason, thank you so much.